Fiancé mocked my weight gain. Said, "You look like a whale." Dumped him after my fitness transformation. I'm Selena. I grew up in Seattle, surrounded by rain, coffee shops, and the comforting hum of a city that never really sleeps. My life wasn't extraordinary. Middle-class upbringing, parents who taught public school, and a love for books that made me a bit of a loner in my younger years. I never thought of myself as stunning. I wasn't the girl who turned heads when I walked into a room, and I didn't mind. I had my friends, my family, and my routines. I was comfortable in my own skin, even if I wasn't the skinny, beautiful one. That was my reality. Then I met Gareth. Gareth was the kind of guy who made people notice him. Not because he was drop-dead gorgeous, he wasn't, but he had this presence. He could charm his way into any group, make anyone laugh, and he had this confidence that made you feel like he knew something the rest of us didn't. When he started paying attention to me, I felt like I'd won the lottery. We met at a work happy hour. He wasn't even part of my company, he was tagging along with a friend of a friend. I remember him making a sarcastic comment about the music playlist, and I laughed. That was all it took. We started talking, and by the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. The first few months were amazing. Gareth was attentive, funny, and supportive. He'd surprise me with little gifts, cook me dinner after a long day, and make me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me for me. But things changed. At first, it was subtle. The little jokes about my love for desserts. The way he'd glance at my plate when I served myself seconds. I ignored it because I thought he was just being playful. But as the months passed, the comments became sharper. "You really need to watch what you eat. Are you sure you want to wear that? It's kind of tight. Maybe we should go to the gym together. I could help you tone up." I started to feel self-conscious. I'd never been skinny, but I wasn't unhealthy. I wasn't the kind of person who obsessed over calories or stepped on a scale every day. I was just me. But Gareth's words stuck with me. It didn't help that I'd started gaining weight. Work was stressful, and my hours were long. I found comfort in food, especially the late-night takeout Gareth and I used to enjoy together. But while he stayed fit, my body started to change. My clothes felt tighter, my energy levels dropped, and I avoided mirrors. One night, Gareth made a comment that cut deeper than usual. We were out for dinner with some of his friends, and someone mentioned beach vacations. Out of nowhere, Gareth looked at me and said, "Well, we'd have to get Selena a one-piece. Can't have her scaring the kids." The table went silent. I laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but inside, I was dying. It wasn't just the comments. It was the way he looked at me. Like I was a project he could fix. He'd poke my stomach and make whale noises when we were alone. Once, I walked in on him talking to his brother on the phone, saying, "She's really let herself go, man. I don't know what to do." I confronted him about it later, but he just shrugged and said, "I'm just being honest. You used to be hot." That hurt. More than I wanted to admit. I started to pull back. I stopped initiating affection, stopped going out as much, stopped dressing up. I didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like I was shrinking in every way except physically. The breaking point came during a dinner at his parents' house. Gareth had been drinking, and he was in one of his joking moods. While everyone was eating, he turned to me and said, "Selena, have you ever considered cutting carbs? I mean, it might help with, and he gestured at my body." His mom looked horrified. His dad cleared his throat and tried to change the subject, but I was done. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and cried. When we got home that night, Gareth acted like nothing had happened. He didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge what he'd said. He just plopped down on the couch and started playing video games. That's when it hit me. This wasn't love. I was staying with someone who didn't respect me, let alone love me. Someone who saw me as a joke. Someone who was supposed to build me up but instead tore me down every chance he got. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't tell Gareth right away. I knew he wouldn't take me seriously if I said, "I'm going to change." He'd probably laugh and tell me to give up before I started. So I kept quiet. I started small. I signed up for a local gym. I joined an online community of women who were focused on health, not just weight loss. I replaced my late-night takeout with healthier options and started walking during my lunch breaks. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to quit. Days when I felt like nothing was changing, and I'd always be the fat girlfriend. But I kept going. I reminded myself that this wasn't about Gareth. It was about me. The weight didn't drop overnight, but it dropped. Slowly, steadily, I started to see changes, not just in my body, but in my confidence. I started to feel like myself again. Gareth, meanwhile, barely noticed. He was too wrapped up in his own world to pay attention to what I was doing. If anything, he seemed annoyed that I wasn't as available to him anymore. A year later, I was a different person. I'd lost over 50 pounds, gained muscle, and finally felt good in my own skin. But the biggest change was internal. I'd found my self-worth. I realized I didn't need Gareth, or anyone else, to validate me. But I wasn't done yet. By the time I hit my goal weight, I was unrecognizable, not just physically, but emotionally. I was confident, strong, and unapologetically myself. I stopped letting Gareth's words affect me because, frankly, they didn't matter anymore. But he didn't know that. For months, Gareth had been too distracted by his video games, work complaints, and self-absorbed nonsense to realize the transformation I'd gone through. He still saw me as the girl he could control with his insults. That was his mistake. I'd been planning my exit for weeks. It wasn't enough to just leave him, I needed him to understand exactly what he'd lost and why. Our 3-year anniversary was coming up, and Gareth suggested we go to the same fancy restaurant we went to on our first date. It was the same place where, a year earlier, he'd humiliated me with his comment about my dress being too tight. I agreed. But this time, I wasn't going as the insecure woman he'd torn down. I was going as the woman who had rebuilt herself, and who was about to tear him apart. The day of the dinner, I went all out. I bought a sleek, fitted red dress that showed off the body I'd worked so hard for. I did my hair, my makeup, and even wore heels, something I hadn't done in years. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl Gareth had mocked. I saw the woman I'd become. When Gareth saw me that night, his jaw dropped. He stammered out a weak compliment about how great I looked, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand what had changed. I smiled sweetly and said, "Thanks. I've been working on myself." At the restaurant, Gareth was unusually attentive. He complimented me, asked about my day, and even held my hand across the table. It was like he was trying to win me over again. But I wasn't falling for it. When the waiter brought out our food, Gareth raised his glass for a toast. "To us," he said. "And to many more years together." I almost laughed. Instead, I smiled and said, "Actually, Gareth, there's something I need to tell you." His face froze. "What's that?" I took a deep breath, pretending to be nervous. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us, about our relationship. And I've realized something important." He leaned forward, clearly bracing himself for what he thought would be a heartfelt confession. "I deserve better." Gareth blinked, stunned. "What?" "I deserve better," I repeated, my voice calm and steady. "For years, you've torn me down, mocked me, and made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And for a long time, I believed you. But I don't believe you anymore. I'm done." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You're joking, right?" "No, Gareth. I'm not joking. This is over. I'm leaving you." The color drained from his face. "You can't just leave me. We've been together for 3 years. And in those 3 years, you've done nothing but treat me like a joke. You called me fat, made fun of me in front of your friends and family, and never once apologized. You don't deserve me. You never did." Gareth started to argue, but I wasn't listening. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving him sitting there with his mouth hanging open. The next few weeks were interesting. Gareth called, texted, and even showed up at my apartment, begging me to take him back. He promised he'd change, that he'd been going through a lot, and that he didn't mean any of the things he'd said. I ignored him. Instead, I focused on myself. I started traveling, meeting new people, and enjoying the life I'd put on hold for far too long. I even posted my fitness transformation story on social media, complete with photos and a heartfelt caption about finding my self-worth. The post went viral. Friends, family, and even strangers flooded the comments with messages of support. It felt amazing to share my journey and inspire others who might be going through something similar. But the best part? Gareth saw the post. A few days after my post went viral, Gareth sent me a furious text. "Why would you post that? You're making me look bad." I didn't respond. Instead, I shared a follow-up post. This time, I included a few anecdotes about the toxic comments Gareth had made during our relationship, without naming him, of course. I wanted people to understand how far I'd come and how important it was to stand up for yourself. The response was overwhelming. People cheered me on, shared their own stories, and thanked me for being so honest. Gareth, on the other hand, became a laughingstock among our mutual friends. I heard through the grapevine that he'd started complaining to anyone who would listen, saying I'd ruined his reputation. But no one took him seriously. They all knew the truth. A few months later, I ran into Gareth at a coffee shop. He looked rough. His once cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by an awkward nervousness. He tried to strike up a conversation, but I cut him off. Gareth, I said, I'm glad I ran into you because there's something I want to say. His eyes lit up, probably thinking I was about to apologize or admit I missed him. Thank you, I said. For showing me exactly what I don't want in a partner. You taught me how to value myself, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But don't mistake this for forgiveness. You don't deserve it. And with that, I walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless. It's been 2 years since I left Gareth, and my life has never been better. I've started my own business, made amazing friends, and even met someone new, a kind, supportive man who loves me for who I am, not what I look like. Gareth, as far as I know, is still single. And every now and then, I hear about him trying to badmouth me to mutual friends. But it doesn't bother me anymore. Because the best revenge isn't just looking good or moving on. It's knowing your worth and never settling for less. And that, my friends, is the real victory.